Welcome to the presentation on the Santa Fe Trail 200 Commemoration, DAR and U. Hello, my name is Dee Sadler, and I am so honored to be the Commemorative Events National Vice Chair of the 200th anniversary of the Santa Fe Trail. Although our chapters will be celebrating this event throughout the Van Buren administration, September 21st, 2021 is the date set forth as the actual anniversary of the trail. Our mission is to recognize the commemoration of the trail by our chapters actively planning and participating in commemorative events, to educate the importance of the trail as a vital commercial highway from 1821 to 1880, to encourage our members to help preserve our DAR markers along the trail, and to demonstrate the patriotism of the pioneers who opened the trail. For a little history of the trail, Santa Fe remains Spain's provincial seat until 1821, when Mexico won its independence from Spain, and Santa Fe became the capital of the Mexican territory of Santa Fe de Nuevo Mexico, or Holy Faith of New Mexico. At this time, the Spanish policy of a closed empire ended, and American trappers and traders moved into the region. William Becknell soon opened a 1,000-mile-long Santa Fe Trail, leaving from Franklin, Missouri, with 21 men and a pack train of goods. Before long, Santa Fe would become a primary destination of hundreds of travelers seeking to trade with the city or to move further west. Becknell's first trip to Santa Fe was made with pack mules and horses laden with as many goods as they could hold. Everything was sold in a matter of days, and upon returning, Becknell ordered as many solid-built Conestoga wagons for future trips. It is important to learn about the DAR women who became involved in the marking of the trail. And here are some excerpts from the book, Story of the Marking of the Santa Fe Trail by the Daughters of the American Revolution in Kansas and the state of Kansas. When the marking of the old Santa Fe Trail was first suggested to the Kansas Daughters at a conference in 1902, no one had any idea of the great undertaking it would prove to be. In 1906, Mrs. W.E. Stanley, state regent, announced the completion of the marking of the trail with 95 granite markers covering roughly 500 miles or half the entire trail. The process of marking the trail prompted State Regent Mrs. George Thacker Guernsey of Independence to recognize the need of a state historian to categorize the archive's information that had been gathered along the way. Without the Kansas Daughters' efforts, the Santa Fe Trail would have been lost. First off is Fanny Geiger Thompson. Fourth KSDR State Regent, was born January 1st, 1857 in Martins Ferry, Ohio, and came to Kansas with her parents in 1867. They lived for a short time on a frontier at Ellsworth and then moved to Topeka. Fanny is the great-granddaughter of Lieutenant William Wallace, who was with Washington's army during the terrible winter at Valley Forge, and she naturally inherited that intense love of country. At the 4th Kansas DAA State Conference in Ottawa in November 5th, 1902, in an address never to be forgotten, Mrs. Thompson suggested the marking of the Santa Fe Trail through Kansas and asked the Kansas Daughters to take up this important work. It was her great desire that the chapters throughout the state should take up by marking the historic sites. One of her interests was the old Santa Fe Trail, which she hoped might be well located someday and be marked by a line of monuments across our state. It was her enthusiasm and persistence that first awakened interest in the subject. It was her hope that the Daughters of the American Revolution might be instrumental in accomplishing this historical work. The nominating committee unanimously chose Mrs. Thompson to serve another year. This is not that this was not to be, as Fanny Geiger Thompson became ill with diphtheria and died at her home in Topeka on February the 17th, 1903. Her grave was marked by the Kansas Society of the Daughters of the American Revolution. Her untimely death prevented her from doing more than outlining the work. A memorial tablet to Mrs. Thompson was placed among the monuments along the Santa Fe Trail at Burlingame, Kansas, by the Topeka DAR chapter in 1906. It was rededicated in September 1992. Emma Hill Stanley, 5th KSDR State Regent and named first honorary Kansas State Regent, was born in Covington, Indiana on April the 4th, 1858, and came to Wichita with her parents in a stagecoach in 1870, 2 years before the railroad reached Wichita. In 1876, she married William Eugene Stanley, who became governor of Kansas in 1899. She had the honor of being mistress to Kansas's first executive mansion. The outstanding achievement of Mrs. Stanley's administration was the completion of the project suggested by the previous state regent, Fanny Geiger Thompson, and the marking of the Santa Fe Trail. From 1906 to 1914, the Santa Fe Trail in its entirety through Kansas was marked with 95 granite markers at a cost of $1,546.29. Using Sibley's 1925 survey map, Recollections of Trail Travelers and Old Settlers, Roy Marsh traced the trail across Kansas for the DAR and the Kansas State Historical Society. In 1905, the legislature appropriated $1,000 to the Daughters for this project. Another $584 was collected from school children on Trial Day, which was Kansas Day in 1906. Across the state, children brought at least a penny to school that day to help mark the Santa Fe Trail. With additional donations, this money would eventually buy 89 red granite engraved stones. In addition, 6 special markers were purchased, some costing as much as $300 by DAR chapters and Old Settlers associations. The initial plan was to place composite stones, a concrete mixture with embedded pebbles, with a bronze plaque. But Mrs. Stanley, contemplating her crumbling sundial, wrote to Grace Meeker, the composite stone would not do. For the final plan, Isabel Cone Harvey solicited a quote of $16 for each marker, which came from red stone Osage granite in Oklahoma. Each would be hand engraved with the Santa Fe Trail marked by the state of Kansas and the Daughters of the American Revolution, 1906. Emma Hill Stanley died on Kansas Day, 1939. Sarah Mitchell Guernsey of Independence was elected regent in 1908 and confirmed in 1909. She was not long in seeing the need for a state historian, as the Daughters in Kansas had done many things worthy of record. At the next conference held in Topeka in 1909, Mrs. C.W. Bidding called attention to the fact that the next state meeting, an amendment to the bylaws creating an office for the state historian, would be submitted. In Lawrence the next year, in 1910, the amendment passed and Mrs. T.A. Corgry of Parsons was elected to the office of state historian. The 17 years history from 1894 to 1911, gathered from old reports, letters, and records, the task was long and at times a difficult one. The state historian compiled the story of the marking of the old Santa Fe Trail separately, thinking it might be published someday. Parts of the story are gleaned from the letters of the old settlers to Mrs. Stanley and Miss Meeker, and every bit of it is true and authentic. The letters and reports are in the historian's box now. By placing this in book form, we hope to keep the memory of the old trail alive. so our children will never inquire, where is it? Signed, Mrs. T.A. Cordry, State Historian, Kansas Daughters of the American Revolution. Isabel Cohn Harvey. Before meeting the state legislator, it was suggested by Isabel Cohn Harvey to the members of the committee to ask for an appropriation of $1,000 for marking the trail. By correspondence, the unanimous consent of the other members was gained, and the legislature readily passed a bill appropriating $1,000 for the marker. In the spring, a meeting of the committee was called. By vote of the members, Mrs. Stanley, Regent, and therefore Chairman ex officio, selected an executive committee from the whole committee to meet in Topeka on April 6, 1905. Ms. Meeker read this report at a Wichita meeting in 1905. Of the $5 given to Mr. Meade, $3 were spent on postage, mostly to letters to county superintendents. $2 still on hand November the 7th, 1905. She also said, after the meeting in December 1904, by correspondence, the committee took action upon the plan of raising funds by asking state legislator to appropriate $1,000 for the markers of the trail. About 50 letters were sent out to the Secretary of Senators and Representatives who represented the territory crossed by the trail. These were but supplementary to the heavy work done by the state regent, the Topeka chapter, and others who succeeded in getting the bill through. Mrs. Charles Piper of Labette, one of the new members of the Hannah Jameson chapter in Parsons, interested herself in the matter and presented the case so successfully to Senator J.W. Connor of Labette County that he introduced the bill in the Senate. Miss Grace Meeker wrote, when the state committee to arrange for the marking of the Santa Fe Trail decided to ask the state for assistance, the legislative work naturally fell to the Topeka members of the Daughters of the American Revolution. For a bill before the Congress is like a naughty child. It must be watched constantly. Once you turn your back on it, it is sure to be a mischief. Mrs. Luther Burns, Mrs. A.H. Horton, and myself were appointed as this committee, and we're delighted to be able to report at this conference that our work terminated March the 1st, 1905, is the final approval of the bill. While those are not familiar with the legislative conditions last winter, it may seem a mistake that we did not ask for larger appropriation. Yet, it should not be a matter of regret that we did not do so, for we could hardly be selected a more inauspicious time to ask the state for appropriation, however small, purely for sentiment, as we were told over and over again. I am glad of the opportunity while making this report to the committee to mention to you some of the names of the friends who assisted us. I want to call attention to the effectiveness of your letters to your members of the legislature. Our committee considers this one of the strongest influences exerted in securing the passage of the bill and for the inception of the agency and constant attention to its fulfillment. We must thank our good state regent, Mrs. Stanley, and her strong right hand, our state secretary, Ms. Meeker. Aside from this work of our own members, we are indebted to Mrs. Noble L. Prentice for enthusiastic help at all times, to Mr. J.T. Pringle for the introduction and oversight of the bill in the House, to Mr. C.E. Hewlett, member of the legislature from Fort Scott, for assistance in the Ways and Means Committee of the House at the time when the bill was in danger of being unfavorably reported. Mr. James L. Larimer, Secretary of the Committee, Mr. John Francis, Senator Connor for the work in the State Senate, Senator F. Dumont Smith, to members of the State Historical Society, and many members of both houses who were friends of the bill from its introduction. In courtesy to these friends, as well as for the honor of our organization, we should now see the project or the object of all this work, The marking of the Santa Fe Trail in Kansas is carried on with the enthusiasm and interest due to the undertaking of such magnitude and importance. Signed, Mrs. Luther Burns, Mr. A.H. Horton, and Mrs. A.M. Harvey. Where can you find resources for your chapter event? Information for your programs and events can be found on the commemorative events page on the national website with a special link to chapter resources. Definitely want the Santa Fe Trail Association. Also want to know about the Santa Fe Trail Association Liaison Committee. The association appointed KSDR member Pat Travis as the official liaison between the association and the DAR chapters. Pat leads 4 other state liaisons in providing history and information about the trail for interested members. Also, the National Park Service is a good resource since the trail has been designated officially. For the next year, resources will be posted to the site, including presentations, chapter minutes, a guide for rededicating a marker, and instructions for our essay contest. Additional resources will be added throughout the celebration of the trail. Contacts for those DAR members providing these resources are Commemorative Events National Vice Chair Dee Sadler, Red Rock, Colorado Chapter Regent Ann Skewis, and Santa Fe Trail Liaison Pat Travis. These women are here to help you and your chapter enjoy the excitement of this commemorative event. The State Regents Project. We are so honored to have access to these beautiful items shown here to support our State Regents Project. The Santa Fe Trail Scarf is $43 and offers an incredibly unique feature. It lists the names of our historic DAR Santa Fe Trail markers. Also, the Santa Fe Trail Charm is only $16.13, and it's an eye catcher, displaying a wagon wheel with a brilliant blue gem in the center, and the backside imprint honors the 200th anniversary of the trail. Please contact State Regent Susan Metzger for ordering. In conclusion, DAR has been blessed with many commemorative events. However, the 200th anniversary of the Santa Fe Trail is credited to all Kansas daughters. Our members thought of the idea, they obtained the financial backing, and saw the completion of each of the 95 markers. Over the years, many of the markers have been rededicated, and it is our hope that that will be the focus of the commemorative event. A rededication honors our Kansas pioneers by shining light on the risks they took crossing the prairies in the most dire of circumstances, harsh weather conditions, lack of food and water, and the attack of Indians wanting to maintain their way of life. Please take this opportunity to bring Kansas to the forefront by rededicating a marker, creating your own program about the Santa Fe Trail, or educating your local school children on the importance of the event. You have been entrusted with the opportunity to tell the story of these pioneers and the DAR women who marked their trail. Thank you for listening.